The way the 12 apostles of Christ died is not always clear to religious scholars. There are some mentions in the New Testament, in apocryphal texts, and even accounts passed down by early Christians about what might have happened to each of them. It's true that some of these accounts differ from one another, but there's always one explanation that is more accepted and considered reliable. What we do know is that the apostles left their personal lives and jobs behind to join Jesus during his mission. After his death, they were commanded to preach the gospel throughout the world, even if it meant dying for it. At that time, the persecution of those who preached the gospel was intense, and like Jesus, many of them were brutally murdered. In this video, I will show you how each of their lives unfolded until their deaths. After Jesus' death, the apostles continued to spread Christianity from Jerusalem to Damascus, Antioch, Asia Minor, Greece, and finally Rome. Here's how each of their lives unfolded, according to biblical accounts and traditions. Peter. Peter was the eldest disciple, and it was to him that Jesus entrusted the leadership of the church and the apostles. See what is written. "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." After Jesus' death, it was Peter who led the mission to preach the gospel to all people. His missionary work continued until the end of his life, 68 years after Christ's birth. After Jesus' death, Peter continued his missionary work for 35 years. Tradition says he was crucified in Rome, but he requested to be hung upside down, as he didn't consider himself worthy to die like his Lord. In addition to being known for his leadership among the disciples, Peter had moments of weakness, such as the famous episode where he denied Jesus 3 times before the crucifixion, fulfilling Christ's prophecy. However, after repenting, he became one of the central figures in the church's expansion, being considered the rock on which Christianity would be built. His life teaches us about redemption and the power of personal transformation through the gospel. Andrew. Andrew was Peter's brother and also a fisherman. He was already a follower of John the Baptist, and when he found Jesus, he introduced his brother Peter to him. Andrew is mentioned in several important moments in the Gospels and was one of Jesus' closest disciples, along with Peter, John, and James. The apostle was present when Jesus spoke about the end times and when Jesus ascended to heaven after his resurrection, and he played a significant role in the expansion of the early church. Tradition reveals that Andrew was also tortured before being crucified in Greece. He was on a mission in the province of Achaia, where he was crucified on an X-shaped cross. His remains were found centuries later and taken to Scotland by sea, where the ship supposedly wrecked. To this day, there is an island called St. Andrew. Andrew, though not as prominent as his brother Peter, played a vital role in spreading the Christian faith to different regions. He is said to have preached the gospel in various parts of Eastern Europe, being considered the patron saint of countries like Russia and Greece. His life serves as an example of someone who, even without always being in the spotlight, played a crucial role in disseminating Christ's message. John. John was the youngest disciple of Christ and was also known as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Along with Peter and James, John was part of Jesus' inner circle of friends and witnessed miracles and revelations. He was the only apostle who accompanied Christ to his crucifixion. According to tradition, as a young man, he was thrown into boiling oil but was unharmed. Later, under the orders of Emperor Domitian, John was exiled to the island of Patmos, where he received the revelation of the Apocalypse. It is believed that he died of natural causes at the age of 94 in the city of Ephesus. In addition to being the author of the Gospel of John and the 3 epistles that bear his name in the New Testament, John also wrote the book of Revelation, revealing the visions he had during his exile on Patmos. He is remembered as the apostle of love, as he emphasized, more than any other, love as the central commandment of Christ. John was the only apostle who, according to tradition, did not die a martyr but lived to an old age. Philip. Philip was the 3rd person to be called by Jesus to be his disciple. The apostle participated in many miracles, and it was to him that Jesus asked how they could feed the crowd in the episode of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. The disciple continued his mission in Asia, in the regions of Phrygia and Hierapolis. The story of Philip's death is unclear, and it is still uncertain how he died. There are reports that he died of natural causes, but some scholars believe he was hanged, stoned, or even crucified in Hierapolis. Philip, in addition to his involvement in Jesus' miracles, played a key role in evangelizing regions outside of Palestine, especially in Asia Minor. Tradition also recounts that he baptized an Ethiopian, an important episode in the spread of Christianity to Africa. His question to Jesus about showing the Father is known for prompting one of the deepest revelations about God's nature. Bartholomew. There are few references in the Bible about the Apostle Bartholomew. His name is mentioned only in the list of disciples. According to some records not found in the Bible, the apostle preached throughout Asia Minor to India and was allegedly flayed and crucified upside down in Albanopolis, Armenia. Another version from Catholic tradition claims he was whipped to death and his body thrown into the sea. Bartholomew, often identified as Nathanael in the Gospels, is remembered for his initial encounter with Jesus when Christ said that in him there was no deceit. Though a lesser-cited figure, his missionary work was significant, with accounts that he carried the Christian message to distant lands such as India and Armenia. His brutal death highlights the sacrifice that many of the apostles made for their faith. Matthew. Matthew was a Jew who had good financial means because he worked as a tax collector for the Roman Empire. Tax collectors were not well regarded by Jewish society, but it was while carrying out this role that Jesus called him to follow him. As the author of one of the Gospels, Matthew revealed many details about Jesus' ministry and life. According to reports, the apostle traveled through Persia, Judea, and Ethiopia, where he was killed. His death was believed to have been caused by a sword wound, but others believe he died of natural causes. His tomb is located in Salerno, an Italian city. Matthew, in addition to being the author of the first gospel, was one of the strongest examples of personal transformation. As a tax collector, he was seen as a traitor to his people, but Jesus called him anyway, showing that the gospel is inclusive and meant for everyone, regardless of their past. His gospel, written primarily for Jews, highlighted Christ's kingship and fulfilled many Old Testament prophecies. Thomas. Although few details are given in the Bible, we can perceive Thomas's personality, a sincere yet pessimistic and doubtful man at times. When Jesus decided to return to Judea to resurrect Lazarus, risking being stoned, Thomas made a comment to his fellow apostles, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." After Jesus' resurrection, the apostle became known for doubting Christ's return until he saw and touched his wounds, at which point he made one of the most beautiful declarations about Christ, "My Lord and my God." Tradition states that the apostle Thomas evangelized India, where he died preaching the gospel. It is believed that he was killed by being pierced with a spear. Thomas is often remembered for his doubt, but it's important to highlight that he was also a courageous apostle. After the resurrection of Christ and the famous episode where he needed to see to believe, Thomas was one of the apostles who traveled farthest, spreading the gospel, and is credited with evangelizing India. To this day, Christian communities in India revere Thomas as the founder of the faith in the region, showing the lasting impact of his ministry. Simon. Simon, also known as the Zealot, is the least mentioned in the New Testament. He preached throughout the Middle East, Persia, and Babylon until he was crucified to death. Simon the Zealot was also beheaded in Saur, Persia. There is another version that says the apostle was sawn in half. Simon, known as the Zealot, was likely part of a group of Jews who fought against Roman rule, which makes his transformation into an apostle even more remarkable. His loyalty to Jesus and the preaching of the gospel suggests a radical life change, moving from political militancy to a fervent commitment to faith. His martyrdom reflects the deep commitment the apostles had to the message they received from Christ. James, son of Zebedee. James was the brother of the apostle John and also part of Jesus' close circle of friends. He was the first of the apostles to be martyred. King Herod Agrippa persecuted the Christians and ordered him to be killed with a sword. James was a fisherman and was called by Jesus while he was working with his father in a boat. He was present at the most important moments of Christ's ministry, and after Jesus' ascension, he became one of the pillars of the early church alongside Peter and John. James, also known as James the Greater, was the first of the apostles to suffer martyrdom, showing that the disciples of Christ would face sacrifice. His importance in Jesus' inner circle being present at crucial moments such as the Transfiguration and the prayer in Gethsemane, underscores the central role he played in Christ's ministry. His early death also served as an example to the nascent church of the cost of following the faith. James, son of Alphaeus. James, the son of Alphaeus, was also known as James the Lesser. He was part of the 12 apostles, but little is known about his life. The Bible does not reveal many details, but James led the church in Jerusalem after Jesus' death and resurrection. He was stoned to death. Tradition says he preached the gospel in Palestine and Egypt. James, often referred to as James the Lesser to distinguish him from the other James, though seldom mentioned, played a significant role in the early church. He is identified by some as the leader of the church in Jerusalem, taking on a leadership role in one of the centers of early Christianity. His death, whether by stoning or crucifixion, reflects the fate of many who led the first generation of Christians. Jude Thaddeus. Jude Thaddeus, also called Lebbeus, was Jesus' cousin and one of his disciples. He preached in many regions, such as Syria, Armenia, and Babylon. It is said that Jude Thaddeus was killed by pagan priests, being struck with a club and then beheaded. The apostle is more frequently mentioned in Catholic tradition and is one of the best-known apostles in Brazil, being the patron of impossible causes. Jude Thaddeus, often confused with Judas Iscariot, was the author of one of the New Testament epistles. His letter is brief but contains important warnings against apostasy and false doctrines, reflecting his concern for the integrity of the faith. He is often depicted with a club, symbolizing his brutal martyrdom. His ministry extended through several regions, including Syria and Mesopotamia. Judas Iscariot. Finally, we have Judas Iscariot, the apostle who betrayed Jesus. He was the only disciple not directly called by Jesus, but chose to follow him. He became the group's treasurer, but due to his attachment to money, he ended up accepting 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus with a kiss. Christian tradition says Judas became so sad and remorseful that he hanged himself on a tree. Judas Iscariot is remembered for his betrayal, which led to Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. His life serves as a warning that even those who walk alongside Christ can stray due to poor choices. The remorse that consumed him after betraying Jesus led to his suicide, a tragic end to his story. He remains one of the most discussed examples of the consequences of greed and falling away from true faith. These are the accounts of the lives and deaths of the apostles. You might be wondering, are there still apostles like in the old days? The title of apostle was directly connected to those who saw Jesus, but the Bible says in Ephesians 4 verse 11 that God still chooses some for this role. What matters is that all of us, as Christians, are called to share the gospel, just as the apostles did.
Now I want to hear from you. What story would you like to see here on the channel? It could be a topic that intrigues you, a curiosity, or even a historical event you find interesting. And of course, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming content. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.